Good morning, gardeners. I am in my own garden today. This is a birch tree that we planted when we moved into the house 6 years ago, and it was about as tall as me at that time, and it had all brown bark. Now it's all the way up to there. It's way up to by the gutters. And I'm so proud of this tree. I love my birch trees. Early this morning, I walked in the woods at the end of the street, and I love the oak trees that grow there and the carpets of ferns and wildflowers that are underneath them. And I've been thinking a lot about trees lately. So let's light our chalice. I'm wondering if you have a special tree. Maybe it's a pine tree with branches that are perfectly spaced for climbing. Maybe it's a tree that someone planted when a baby was born, maybe when you were born, or in memory of someone who has passed. Maybe it's a tree that feeds your family, an apple tree or a cherry tree. Or perhaps it's just a tree that turns brilliant yellow or red in the fall and makes you happy. Whatever, I invite you to think about a special tree as we light the chalice. We light this chalice as a symbol of our faith, the light of truth, and the warmth of love. And you can join me at home as we sing, "Rise Up, O Flame." Rise up, O flame, by thy light glowing, show to us beauty, vision, and joy. Rise up, O flame, by thy light glowing, show to us beauty, vision, and joy. And on that note, we can do our joys and sorrows. If I'm thinking about trees, I have to say, when I have a tree that is growing and is healthy and is green, that makes me very, very happy. And at the same time, in my city, I see so many trees that are dying, some of them because they're old, some of them because they have disease or the emerald ash borer if they're ash trees. And sometimes people just cut them down because they think they're messy, which I don't quite understand, but that's what people do sometimes. So that makes me very, very sad. I will give you a chance to do this at home and think about joys and sorrows in your life. So, I've got something to show you. These are young oak trees. Every last one of them was growing in the garden at church. You gotta think about that a second. Where did they come from? I suspect a squirrel planted it, didn't retrieve it and eat it over winter. And because they were growing where we were gonna grow vegetables, and we thought, you know, can't really have an oak tree there because they get so big, we potted them up. So we're hoping that eventually these will go back into the forest and help feed squirrels and blue jays and everybody else that likes to eat acorns and do all the things that trees do. I have a story to share with you. Wangari's Trees of Peace. This is a true story from Africa. Wangari was a child in Kenya, and she did some amazing things, and she faced some pretty difficult hardships as well. And I want you to think about this as you hear this story, because it has a lot to do with trees. And Wangari Maathai writes, "The earth was naked. For me, the mission was to try to cover it with green." Wangari lives under an umbrella of green trees in the shadow of Mount Kenya in Africa. She watches the birds in the forest where she and her mother go to gather firewood for cooking. And she helps harvest the sweet potatoes, sugarcane, and maize from the rich soil. Maize is what most of the world calls what we call corn. Wangari was really smart. She shines in school, and when she grows tall, like the trees in the forest, she wins a scholarship to study in America. 6 years later, her studies over, Wangari returns to her Kenya home, and she sees a change. What has happened, she wonders. Where are the trees? Wangari sees women bent from hauling firewood miles and miles from home. She sees barren land where no crops can grow. Where are the birds, she wonders. Thousands of trees have been cut down to make room for buildings, but no one planted new trees to take their place. Will all of Kenya become a desert, she wonders, as her tears fall? Wangari thinks about the barren land. I can begin to replace some of the lost trees in my own backyard, one tree at a time. And she starts by planting 9 seedlings. Watching the seedlings take root gives Wangari an idea to plant more, to start a farm for baby trees, a nursery. In an open space, she plants row after row of the tiny trees. Next, Wangari convinces the village women that planting trees is a good thing. She gives each one a seedling. Our lives will be better when we have trees again. You'll see, we are planting seeds of hope. The women spread out over their village, planting tiny trees in long rows, like a green belt stretching over the land. The government men laugh. Women can't do this, they say. It takes trained foresters to plant trees. The women ignore the laughter and keep planting. Wangari pays them a small amount for each seedling still living after 3 months, their first earnings ever. Word travels like wind rustling through the leaves about the green returning to Wangari's village. Soon other women in other villages and towns and cities in Kenya are planting long rows of seedlings too. But the cutting continues. Wangari stands as tall as an oak to protect the old trees remaining. We need a park more than an office tower, she said. The government men disagree. Wangari blocks their way, so they hit her with clubs. They call her a troublemaker and put her in jail. And still she stands tall. Right is right, even if you're alone. But Wangari is not alone. Talk of the trees spreads over all of Africa like ripples in Lake Victoria. More women hear the talk and plant even more seedlings in longer and longer rows. The seedlings take root and grow tall until there are over 30 million trees where there were none. The umbrella of green in Kenya returns. Women walk tall, their backs straight, for now they can gather firewood closer to home. The land is no longer barren. Sweet potatoes, sugarcane, and maize grow again in the rich red earth. The whole world hears of Wangari's trees and of her army of women who planted them. And if you were to climb to the very top of Mount Kenya today, you would see the millions of trees growing below you and the green Wangari brought back to Africa. Wangari was a real person. She actually won the Nobel Peace Prize for her work with the trees. And that makes me wonder, why were the trees so important? In Africa, the people needed the wood to cook with, and when they cut the trees down, it disrupted the whole water cycle, and basically the land did turn into desert, and they couldn't grow their crops anymore, and they had to walk farther and farther to get what they needed. So the trees made a real difference in Africa. And here around us, around my home, around your home, trees do the same sorts of things. We know that they help clean the air and they give us oxygen as they photosynthesize. We know on a hot day, trees are wonderful for shade, so they help us be comfortable. We get paper from trees. We get wood to build our houses with from trees. We get food from certain trees, whether it's a maple tree or an apple tree. And those are the things that are of direct benefit to us humans. But there are things that are even deeper, and often we don't see them. The tree roots that grow underground hold the soil in place, and when it rains, and rains hard, that helps keep the soil from washing away, and the roots absorb that water so that we don't have as much flooding. So they're very important for that. And perhaps in the background you can hear some of the birds here. There are lots of animals that depend on trees, whether it's the birds or the insects or squirrels or raccoons or you name it. There's a lot of animals that depend on the trees. And there are plants that depend on trees. There are lichens that grow on them. There's a whole community of plants that depend on the trees to anchor the ecosystem. And when we lose those trees, we lose all of that. One of the things that is really interesting right now in this time and place is that when the tree leaves make their sugar, they take the carbon dioxide out of the air, they make sugar, and that helps the tree grow. The tree is actually removing that CO2 from the air and storing it as wood as it grows. And if you think about that, that is reversing climate change. So it's something we can do that is really, really important. And the more trees we can plant, the more carbon we can absorb and tuck away or sequester into trees and grasses and other plants as well, but especially trees. The Act for the Earth team at Church is thinking about this in a very, very deep way. They know this is very, very important. And they also know that there are neighborhoods near our church where there are very, very few trees. And the people that live in those homes get really, really hot in the summer because there's no shade. They have more pollution because there's no tree to absorb that pollution. And so to try to fix both problems, they are actually growing trees at church. And if you go, you will see this long wooden bed, and it's filled with gravel, and in that gravel are a bunch of trees. And those trees are watered a couple times a day. And while they're in that gravel bed, their roots get really strong and thick and net-like, so that when they get planted in the soil, they are ready to take off running. Take off, not literally running, but take off and grow. And those trees will be donated to families in these neighborhoods that don't have enough trees. So it's a really, really special project that the Act for the Earth group is doing. So I'm back under my birch tree, giving me wonderful shade. And I want us to think about trees. Trees take a long time to grow. Some of them can be 300 years old. There are sequoias that are thousands of years old. So trees take a while to grow, and we also know that cities are pretty tough places for them to grow. It's hot and it's dry. They often don't have enough root space because they're squeezed between roads and sidewalks and buildings, and so it's a tough place. So I want to invite you to think about trees and help us take care of trees, water them, protect their roots from lawnmowers and anything else that might hurt them, cars that might park on top of them. And let's help the trees grow because they are so, so very important. And on that note, we're at the end of our session, and as we leave, we will extinguish our flame, but we know that the light of truth and the warmth of love go with us in our heart. Have a wonderful week.